Ask yourself this question. What would you do if you saw a child holding their unconscious sibling on the street? This isn't a casual question. This is the real story of how you value life and how you will measure the moment of compassion. Marcus was a meticulous man. He was a manager at a large technology company in Chicago. His mind was constantly preoccupied with business deals, numbers, and decisions that moved millions. He looked as solid as the buildings he constructed through external investments, and when you looked at him, he seemed successful and respectable. But in reality, there was a broken man behind this profile. After losing his wife Catherine 3 years ago, Marcus had turned routine into a shield against himself, his thoughts, and the incessant voices. He would always wake at 5 a.m., review files before breakfast, work until he had no time left to think about anything else. Now, for him, continuing to live was merely about managing his duties and his work. On a humid December morning, the sun was sharper than usual. The hot air seemed to stick to the skin of passers-by. Marcus was walking down Main Street after leaving a multi-million-dollar meeting with foreign investors. For another businessman, this would have been a day of celebration, but Marcus felt no joy. Deals were just cold numbers. Since Catherine's death, he had become a withdrawn, hollow person, unable to fill the ear-scratching silence of his empty home. Walking through crowded streets, he observed without truly seeing, street vendors advertising goods, tourists photographing historical buildings, hurried workers balancing boxed meals. It was all a routine he knew by heart, but it no longer touched him, and nothing made sense. The world continued on, alive, noisy, in a rush, while he remained inside it, always motionless and numb. That's when he heard it, a sound nearly swallowed by street noise, not music, not conversation, not crying. A deep and sharp silence had seized him again, and Marcus instinctively stopped, as if that sound had awakened something sleeping within it. He thought about continuing. How many times had he ignored calls for help? The city was full of sad stories, but there was something different in that sound. Raw, defenseless desperation that made it impossible to ignore. Following the sound, his steps led him to a narrow alley between old brick walls. Light barely seeped through, making the atmosphere almost gray and suffocating. And there, at the end of that alley, Marcus saw her. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, was sitting on the cracked ground. Her yellow hair was tangled, with dirty strands falling across her face. Her dress, pieced together from worn and tattered fabric, was wet with dust and sweat. Her feet were bare, covered with calluses and cuts from walking too much through bad places. But what froze Marcus's heart wasn't this obvious scene of misery. In the girl's frail arms lay a 2-year-old baby, unmistakably unconscious. Her skin was cold and colorless. Her lips were cracked, her small body completely motionless. The morning's suffocating heat made life seem so cruel compared to the coldness of this silent, still child. The girl's eyes looked toward Marcus, blue and filled with tears. Her innocence and helplessness were unmistakable. No one should carry these feelings, especially not a child. And then, with a trembling voice, she spoke words that would echo in Marcus's mind forever. "Sir, will you help my sister? She fell asleep last night, but she didn't wake up this morning. She's very cold and still. I can't wake her up. I hope she's just sleeping very deeply." For a few seconds, time stood still. Marcus felt as if he'd been struck in the chest. His insides burned. The girl's words pierced the armor, the wound he'd been trying to hide behind work and numbers. The memory of his wife Catherine, disappearing before his eyes when he couldn't save her. Now, before this child, helplessness came back like a wave. He tried to look around for an adult responsible for the children, but the street was empty. Just himself, the girl, and her unconscious little sister who worried him. Silence fell, growing heavier by the moment. Only the girl's soft crying barely broke through it, and it seemed like more than just needing help. It seemed like wanting finally to be seen by someone. Marcus didn't answer immediately. His legs felt stuck to the ground and his breath caught. What could he say? What could he do in the face of such pain, innocence, and devastation? In that moment, Marcus noticed something that would change the course of his own life. He seemed to understand that he couldn't hide behind numbers, files, and meetings anymore, and he thought that maybe it was time. The weight of that scene was screaming that he needed to make a decision. The street silence seemed designed to crush every thought in Marcus's mind. Still paralyzed before the girl, he almost instinctively knelt down. He approached carefully, as if afraid to confirm what he already knew, and continued forward. reaching out his hand to touch the child's small body. When his fingers touched that cold, pale skin, it felt like a knife wound to the heart. But Marcus didn't give up. He moved his fingertips to her fragile, delicate neck, searching for the slightest sign. Seconds passed, but there was nothing. Then he felt the faintest pulse, almost imperceptible. And in that moment he understood. She was just unconscious. Marcus's heart raced. He gasped like he'd just woken from a nightmare. He looked into Sophie's tearful eyes, the girl still holding her sister as if she was holding the world. And Marcus's eyes filled with tears too. "She's alive," he said, his voice breaking. "Your sister will wake up. We can wake her." The response came immediately. The girl's eyes opened wide, hope reflected in them as if she'd heard an impossible miracle. "Are you sure?" she whispered, holding her sister's small body even tighter. "She didn't move all night." "She's so cold. Look." Marcus took a deep breath. He knew there was no time to waste. With trembling hands, he pulled out his cell phone and called County Hospital, where he'd been making anonymous donations since his wife's death. An experienced doctor answered the phone. "Dr. Thompson, this is Marcus Harrison. Critical situation. An unconscious child, very ill. I'm bringing her now. Get intensive care ready." Without waiting for a response, he hung up and reached to take the little girl in his arms. "Give me your sister. I have to get her to the hospital right now." He felt a moment of hesitation, but there was a light of hope in the girl's blue eyes. With small, trembling hands, she handed the baby to Marcus's arms. He was surprised by the child's weight. She was so light and thin. The malnutrition was clearly visible. "I'm coming with you," Marcus said firmly but gently. "I won't leave you alone." The girl picked up a cracked plastic bag from the ground, which seemed to be all she owned, and ran after Marcus. When they left the street, the city remained loud and indifferent, as if nothing had happened. But for Marcus, the world was no longer the same. They ran together to the car at the corner. The silence inside the vehicle was broken only by Marcus's heavy breathing and the girl's quiet sobs. He adjusted the baby in his arms, watching the rise and fall of her small chest as she struggled to breathe. Chicago traffic seemed even heavier that day. Horns honked, motorcycles weaved between cars, red lights came at the wrong times. Every second lost was torture. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, while the girl beside him cried silently. Marcus always felt greater and heavier responsibility and loss. This wasn't just about getting an unconscious child to the hospital. This was about not letting death win again. He was doing everything he could and would do to not miss this second chance. Finally, they arrived at the hospital. The medical team was waiting at the emergency room door. Marcus handed the baby to the nurses, but didn't let go immediately. He had to hear them say, "We'll take it from here." The hospital doors closed behind Marcus, with a dim sound of departure. The baby disappeared into the busy corridors, wrapped in the arms of doctors already barking technical orders. The girl was visibly anxious, holding the hand of a living child. Out of breath, she stood in the lobby waiting. Minutes later, a doctor emerged with a grave expression. "The situation is serious. Her unconsciousness might have been a temporary problem with blood flow to the brain, but we still have a chance. Severe malnutrition, advanced lung infection. We need to move quickly." Marcus nodded, but these words hit hard. Finding the child alive wasn't enough. Now the real struggle began. Eventually, the girl, whose name turned out to be Sophie, cried silently beside him. While waiting for news, a social worker approached him. Her name was written on her badge, Jennifer Walsh. He thought of his dead wife's name and his chest burned for a moment. "Are you a relative of the child?" she asked in a bureaucratic tone, like someone following protocol. "No," he answered curtly, "but I brought her here." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll need your information. This girl can't just leave here with a stranger. The Child Protection Agency will be contacted. We need to follow procedure." These words felt like ice water poured on Marcus's shoulders. For the first time he realized he could lose Sophie, that the system could take her from him at any moment. The intensity of the little girl's grip on his fingers increased, as if she understood too. Over the next few days, the tension only grew. Sophie was seen by psychiatrists and nurses, but Marcus wouldn't leave her side when she appeared. He slept in chairs next to her and refused to eat when she wasn't there. This moved the staff, but also raised questions. Who was this man to carry such trust? Marcus, meanwhile, was conflicted. Every time he looked at Sophie, he saw the reflection of his wife's face in her final days. The child's fragility reopened old wounds he thought he'd already buried. At night, alone at home, he stared at a glass of whiskey and never drank it, wondering if he had the strength to lose Sophie too. Maybe this time it would be even worse, he thought. The pressure didn't come only from within. Jennifer, the social worker, looked suspicious. One day she entered the temporary room where Sophie was resting. "I have many other children to help. Families have been waiting on the adoption list for years. What you're doing is nice, but it doesn't give you any rights over them, understand?" Marcus exploded. The chair scraped the floor like thunder. "Rights!" His voice rose. "I'm not talking about paperwork now. I'm talking about a child who needs emergency medical care. If I hadn't gone into that street, she'd still be unconscious right now." The argument echoed through the corridors, and Sophie, afraid that something would shatter, cowered in fear. Even in the midst of this storm, there was hope. One afternoon, while waiting for news about the baby, Sophie pulled a purple object from her plastic bag, an old, nearly worn-out photograph of a smiling elderly woman, torn. "My grandmother," she said quietly. "She took care of us." After she left, me and Lily were very alone. Marcus held the photo carefully, as if it was too fragile to touch. Even faded, this image spoke of roots, loss, and responsibilities too heavy for such small shoulders. A while later, the doctor came with news. Sophie's sister made it through the first night. She's still very weak, but starting to wake up. She's responding. It's not as bad as we feared. Sophie cried with relief, burying Marcus's arm in her tears. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about saving 2 children. It was about saving himself from this meaningless life. But the road would never be easy. The Child Protection Agency had already been informed. Investigations would be opened. Interviews, home visits, official reports. Every step would be filled with suspicious looks and official paperwork. But Marcus was already too attached. And every movement Sophie made, every look, every word, every emerging fear, only increased his feeling and conviction that he could no longer leave her alone. But what about you? If you were in Marcus's position, what would you do? Would you stand against the system or let fate decide? Write in the comments. I'm really curious. The courtroom smelled of wood and heavy air. The air conditioning was cold, but Marcus was sweating in his black suit. His every step, the girl's steps, clicked like taps, as if all eyes were on them. Beside him, Sophie held his hand so tightly as if she had found shelter. The uncomfortable silence in the courtroom felt very oppressive. A long table, a judge with a neutral face, the prosecutor on one side, social worker Jennifer on the other. Marcus felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Mr. Marcus Harrison," the judge began with a stern voice, "we are here to assess the situation of the children under our care." Bureaucratic words followed. Protocols, records, adoption procedures, reports, but Marcus barely heard anything. He only felt Sophie's trembling small body beside him. When the prosecutor stood up, the blow came hard. "Your Honor, we must not forget that there are hundreds of families waiting years on the official adoption list. The plaintiff is a powerful businessman, but this does not place him above the law." His instinct told him to stand up, to answer back, to shout that this wasn't about power, but about lives. But what stopped him was Sophie's pleading gaze, asking him not to leave her alone. The judge turned toward her. "Can you tell me your name?" Her voice trembled. "I'm Sophie." "So, what do you want to tell me now, Sophie?" he asked, his tone unchanged. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Sophie took a deep breath, fixing her eyes on the judge, then on Marcus. Her voice was low but solid and determined, with the strength of someone who had experienced sorrows that didn't belong to childhood. "I want to stay with you," she said. "You didn't let my sister die. You took her to the hospital. You didn't leave me alone. You're my family." Jennifer, the social worker, nervously cleared her throat. "With respect, Your Honor, we cannot base a legal decision on the emotional attachments of a traumatized child." Marcus exploded in that moment. The chair scraped the floor like thunder. "Traumatized," he raised his voice. "This girl is stronger than many adults I know. She took care of her sister on the street. She went hungry many times so Lily could eat, and yet she's here, just not wanting to be abandoned." "Your Honor, I lost my wife Catherine to illness. I couldn't save her. For 3 years I hid behind files, my work, and my meetings because I didn't want to feel that pain again. But when I found Sophie and Lily on that street, I understood I couldn't run anymore. I chose to be here. I chose to fight for them, and I will fight until the end." The room fell silent. The sound of the air conditioning seemed louder. Seconds seemed longer. Sophie cried quietly, but didn't let go of Marcus's hand. The judge looked at his desk over his glasses. His voice was slow, but carried a sharp weight. "The court, taking into account the emotional context, considering social risk, evidence of emergency care, and the child's own statement, grants temporary custody of the minors to Mr. Marcus Harrison." The words echoed like the sound of freedom breaking free. Sophie collapsed into Marcus's lap, crying, finally feeling and believing she was safe. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling warm tears fall despite years of accumulation. He knew that nothing would ever be the same after this. The exit seemed longer than the courthouse corridor. Marcus walked slowly, as if each step weighed a ton. Sophie walked beside him holding his hand, her small plastic backpack swinging on her shoulder. Her face was still wet with tears, but her eyes reflected something new. Not just fear anymore, hope, happiness, and a little bit of hesitation. Outside, the city's noise continued. Honking horns, voices full of the worry of being somewhere on time, footsteps echoing on the pavement. But for Marcus, everything was silent. He didn't feel the hot wind of Chicago hitting his face. The judge's voice still echoed in his mind, and these words that changed their lives repeated over and over, "I grant temporary custody." They got into the car in silence. Sophie rested her head against the window, eyes half closed, still tired from the weight of recent days. Marcus started the engine, but didn't move immediately. For a moment he sat still, his hands on the steering wheel, taking deep breaths. For the first time in years, there was no meeting waiting for him. There were no reports piled on his desk, just the void of not knowing what to do next. But this time the void wasn't frightening, it was full of anticipation to be filled. "Mr. Marcus," Sophie's voice broke the silence. He turned his face. "Yes, dear?" "The judge said I can stay with you." "But what if one day you get tired of me? Will you send me back?" He felt the weight of these words in every syllable. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back his emotions. Then he moved closer to her, placed his hand on her small shoulder, and spoke in almost a whisper. "I will never get tired of you, Sophie." "Do you understand?" "Never. I would never say such a thing, and I never will. You came back because you and Lily matter. You matter. Do you understand? I will be happy with you. I will cry with you. But I will stay with you. Always." The car continued. They arrived home at sunset. The mansion's door slowly opened, revealing a perfectly manicured garden and mirrored windows of the house. For Sophie, it was a strange world far from the dust and cold streets. She hesitated at the entrance. Marcus noticed and bent down to her level. "This is your home," he said firmly but gently. "You don't need to be afraid. It's yours now." The silence was different from the courthouse silence. Too much space, too many white walls, too much expensive furniture. Despite its luxury, Marcus realized his house had been as empty before Sophie as it was now. No sounds of life, no joy, no family. Sophie dropped her plastic bag in a corner and stopped, as if she was in a forbidden zone, looking around. She examined the walls, the furniture, the light coming through the windows. "Can I really stay here?" she asked. "Yes." Marcus smiled, his eyes still red. "This place had no meaning until now. Now it does, because now you're here." That night Marcus barely slept. He sat in a chair facing the half-open door of the room where Sophie was sleeping. Her body lay in bed, as if still remembering the cold pavement of the street, but her breathing was calm. For the first time since he found her, she was sleeping peacefully. Marcus leaned his head back and closed his eyes, but memories reminded him of themselves with revenge. Catherine, his wife, fragile on a hospital bed, holding his hand in her final moments. He had never been able to save her, but now somehow he felt called with a new purpose, to still save those who could be saved, to save Sophie and Lily. The next morning before sunrise he woke up. As always he made coffee, but the kitchen didn't look the same. Next to the porcelain cup was a child's drawing on a piece of paper. Lines, crooked scribbles, 3 figures holding hands, a tall man, a girl with braids, and another little girl, all smiling. In small letters underneath it read, "My new family." Marcus stood frozen, looking at that drawing as if it was a silent contract. His eyes filled with tears. He carefully placed the paper in a leather folder, as if he was filing the most important document of his life. When Sophie entered the kitchen with sleep-filled eyes, Marcus held up the paper. "Did you make this?" Sophie hesitantly nodded. "We did. You, me, and Lily. Together." Marcus's heart tightened. "It's very beautiful. Very, very beautiful." That morning, for the first time, Marcus couldn't concentrate on his coffee. He kept looking at the drawing, counting the hours until Lily could leave the hospital, trying to satisfy Sophie's hunger. Omelette, cheese, tomatoes. The girl ate everything eagerly, but sometimes she stopped and looked at Marcus, as if she still wasn't sure this was real. "Will my sister be okay? Will she come?" she asked, her mouth full, worry in her eyes. "Yes, sweetie. Lily is very strong. The doctor said she's getting better every day. In a couple of days we'll pick her up. We'll bring her here." Sophie smiled, and for the first time Marcus saw her smile. A complete, genuine smile, not hindered by any worry. His heart broke, but in a good way. There was a feeling of relief. Days passed quickly. When Lily was discharged from the hospital, Marcus went to get her. The girl was still very weak, still very small and fragile, but there was a certain source in her eyes. Life. When Sophie saw her sister in the hospital corridor, she stopped. "Lily," she whispered, "did you really wake up?" Lily heard her voice for the first time in Marcus's arms, weak but clear. "Sophie." Sophie started crying. Happy tears, tears of relief. Marcus held both of them together, his two girls, and for the first time he began to believe that he might be able to heal the lost 3 years. That morning the mansion's garden looked different. The sun was no longer a reminder of emptiness, but an announcement of movement, shining. The laughter of children echoed in the garden, mixed with the sound of the hose Sophie was holding, joyfully watering the plants with the enthusiasm that only free children can have. Lily, now recovered, ran after butterflies, tripping over her own feet, but always getting up with a smile. She wasn't fully strong yet, but she was getting better every day, more alive every day. Marcus, leaning from the balcony, watched with a forgotten coffee cup in his hand. He was no longer the man who woke up early and reviewed files. Now the papers lay waiting in piles that could wait. He had discovered something that no multi-million-dollar meeting had ever offered him: the meaning of staying, being a family. The house was no longer silent, nor was it as orderly as before. Toys were scattered in the hallway, drawings were stuck on the refrigerator, a teddy bear was forgotten on the couch, children's clothes were left on the bathroom door. Every detail was a reminder that this once cold mansion now breathed, the breath of life. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the night silence. He knew that behind 2 doors there were light breaths keeping him awake, keeping him alive. Sometimes Sophie would wake up, ask for water, or have a bad dream. Marcus would get up, give her water, tuck her in, straighten her hair, and sit beside her until she fell asleep again. And he felt how meaningful this was, how full of meaning it was to do this. Not everything was simple. Visits from the Child Protection Agency continued. Papers to file, future hearings, daily adjustments. But inside, Marcus had already made the decision that changed everything. No matter how hard it was, Sophie and Lily were his family. And family is not negotiable. Jennifer, the social worker, still looked suspicious. During a home visit, she observed Marcus's home care, his relationship with the children, how he treated them. Sophie and Lily showed no fear. On the contrary, they held Marcus's hand as if it was an iron ring. "It looks good," Jennifer said, writing in her notebook, but she still wasn't completely at ease. "Jennifer," Marcus asked, "how long will this process continue?" "They're finally home, finally safe. What else do I need to find?" Jennifer spoke slowly. "The system is long, Mr. Harrison. But your file is going well. The children's statements, medical reports, everything is in your favor. If this situation continues, you could get permanent custody in a year. You could officially adopt them." Marcus nodded. A year. Maybe long. But it was proof he wouldn't lose them. Proof he could recognize them as his own children. One night, sitting on the edge of her bed, Sophie entered the room with quiet steps, holding a blanket. She had learned, though sometimes she still woke up frightened, that it had been real unconsciousness. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Of course, dear. Whatever you want." "Do you not love? I mean, when you get tired of me, will you send me back? If you start saying go back to other children." The words pierced Marcus like a knife. It clearly showed how much this child had suffered, how much loss she had experienced, and how quickly she had to learn how much she had to fear. Marcus swallowed hard. He knelt before her, took her small hands, and answered slowly. "You will never be a burden to me, Sophie. Do you understand? Never. I would never say such a thing, and I never will. You came back because you and Lily matter. You matter. Do you understand? I will be happy with you, I will cry with you, but I will stay with you. Always." Sophie let out a cry-like sound, buried her head in Marcus's chest, and cried. She cried from happiness. It was the cry of realizing she was no longer lost. From that moment on, the house changed. Games in the garden, laughter at the table, reading stories in bed, sitting together at breakfast. As Lily grew, as she became stronger, as Sophie opened up more, Marcus understood that this rescue had been mutual. He didn't save them. They saved him. One morning Marcus was looking at Sophie. The girl was feeding Lily at breakfast, warning her not to eat too much, and Marcus realized that this girl was no longer just a child. This girl was a big sister, and she had a sister. This girl knew what it meant to be family. "Dad," Lily called out, using this word for the first time. Marcus waited to confirm what he had heard, afraid he might have imagined it. "Dad, I want water." Marcus's heart stopped, then raced wildly. "Yes, sweetie, right away." As he brought the water, his hands trembled. Sophie noticed, looked at Marcus, and understood. She understood that Marcus needed them just as much as Lily, and she needed Marcus. The following months were perhaps the happiest of his life. School registrations, doctor visits, new clothes, new shoes, outdoor trips, normal life, simple life, but for Marcus, a life of infinite value. One day at the park, with Sophie and Lily beside him, Marcus stepped aside and looked at his phone. It was filled with tons of meeting reminders, emails, job offers, but none of it mattered, none of it. He simply turned off his phone, just turned it off. He turned to the children. "Today is all ours, just ours. What do you want to do?" Sophie and Lily looked at each other and smiled. A very simple answer, but very sincere. "We want to be with you." That's all. Marcus held them in the middle of the park, for everyone to see, and for the first time he felt no regret, no worry, just peace in the reality of this moment's relationship, this moment's family. What this story shows us is that it contains emotions you might have felt at some point in your life. It tells us that family is not just about blood relations. Sometimes seeing and showing the compassion needed at the right moment is enough. It clearly shows us that sometimes what someone needs is simply a place where they can exist, be accepted, and be loved. No pain is completely healed. No trauma is completely repaired. But when there is care, when there is willingness, when there is always someone beside you, it is inevitable that even the deepest wounds will be transformed into strength, love, and compassion. The transformation of Sophie and Lily proved this. Marcus saw this, lived it, and discovered it. And so did Sophie and Lily. A new beginning, a new hope, a new family. And now I want to speak directly with you. Did you somehow realize that this story is also about you? Because at some point we all tried to hide pain like Marcus behind our responsibilities, our work, or our routines. We swept our sorrows and traumas under the rug. We had deep pains that we tried to hide even from ourselves, and at some point we all needed, like Sophie, just not to be left alone. We wanted this deeply and truly. If this story found you today, you can think of it as a reminder that you are not alone. The most important thing is not to give up on making connections. Thank you for listening to the end. If you haven't followed us yet, now is the time to do so. If you already follow us, share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how this story made you feel. This helps us continue bringing stories like this to you.